Broad Bay Church in Waldoboro, Maine, serves its community in many ways. One of those ways is by sharing music in a series of live concerts. And the centerpiece of one of its most celebrated periodic concerts is its E and G hook and Hastings organ, built in 1875. When Broad Bay purchased the building in 2002, the organ was playable, but in need of a full restoration to bring it back to life. The church hired David E. Wallace and Company, pipe organ builders and restorers, from Gorham, Maine. Nick Wallace explains the early work that they completed.
It was around 2008 that at the time we did the wind reservoir, and then the other large component were what we call the wind chests. And, small other things were corrected along the way, just because in any organ, when you go to take one part out, you usually have to take, 4 or 5 other parts out. And while they're out there, it's the most cost-effective time to fix them. That kind of left a little bit more work to be done. A few years later, we restored the pedal board. That work was done, and then I think that leads us to what we did in the recent completed work.
In early 2023, thanks to a generous donation from Ted and Carol Smith, the last pieces of the restoration puzzle were finally completed. Nick Wallace explains.
So what was left was kind of a very careful, what we call a regulation of the pipework. That amounted to going through and listening to every single pipe and making careful adjustments to exactly how much air it was getting, or the very minute little changes in the shape of the pipe mouth, and correcting those things, and then listening to them, each set of pipes as a whole. And really the last step of that, because there's always more, was to listen to each set of pipes relative to another set of pipes.
Wallace and Company know that 2 key areas of a properly restored organ pipe can be found at both of its ends: the top and the tip.
During this phase of the work, we were able to install what we call scroll tuners. So we soldered in a new piece of more flexible, what we call pipe metal, so that when we tune it now, we can there are 2 little sardine can scrolls, essentially, that you can scroll up to lower the pitch or scroll it down to make the pitch higher. The other thing that we did, those pipes also being very large and being very heavy, the toe of the pipe, which is, the point on which the pipe actually stands, those toes were crushed. They had all kind of folded into themselves. So those pipes were not getting the full burst of air that they should get. And we corrected that by soldering on new tips that are much thicker metal. So the combination of those 2 things, working on the tip of the pipe and the top with the scroll, they're very happy now. They speak promptly, and they sound like they go with the rest of the organ.
The project not only addressed the restoration of the pipes, but it also presented an opportunity to take another look at the color and design of them. While many believed that the original color was gold-toned, the pipes were actually much more ornately detailed. Reverend Nancy Duncan discovered a historic photograph of the organ and presented it to the restorers, as well as Broad Bay's newly formed Organ Pipe Committee. Although the photo was black and white, it gave important clues about the organ's history, while also serving as inspiration for the restoration work. Nick Wallace explains.
One of the things that we did when we came up to kind of talk about this process was we prepared a series of sample pictures that are around the same age, but again, in most instances, every organ is a little bit different in its decoration. Just to kind of give a broad picture of here's, in the late 19th century, here's what builders were doing. Here's how organs were being decorated. So then, working with the committee, a series of kind of samples were proposed, and we worked together to let's change a little bit of this or a little bit of that, and came up with something that I think everybody was happy with. And then it was just a process of coming up and retrieving the pipes and bringing them to the shop. Very first thing, we strip everybody down so that, all of the sheet metal was taken off, all of the toes were taken off. So all the metal that didn't need to be there was removed. And then it was just a real simple process of layering on the chemical stripper and removing layer after layer of paint. And then we were on to priming and painting. And the last part was gilding.
Evelyn Clues is a longtime member of the church and led the Pipe Organ Committee by drawing up various options for the pipe design. Here she explains the impetus for the chosen colors.
We already have colors in our church. We have greens, we have an off-white, we have red carpeting, we have a bunch of colors. Why don't we try to use those colors?
Evelyn continues, describing the inspiration for the anchor crosses.
Well, the anchor crosses are actually a fairly common motif, and it was suggested by one of the committee members who had served in the Navy. And Walderboro is an oceanside community, really, and has a naval history in that it was a huge boat building center in the 19th century. So the suggestion of the anchor crosses as a motif seemed to fit naturally with our community and with our church. And it, again, was a very clean, aesthetically complete design.
Nick Wallace agrees.
I think overall the design fits the bill. It is not exactly a historic recreation, but it's a historically inspired new creation that I think fits better than if we had gone on a tour of 1875 Hook and Hastings organs and said, here's one from the same year, it's got its stenciling, this is what we're doing, no questions asked. That wasn't going to work here. So I think what we came up with between everybody was the right way to go.
The completion of any extensive restoration project is always a labor of love. Participants hope for the best, both for the work itself and for the community that it serves. And in the case of Broad Bay's Hook and Hastings organ, everyone seemed to agree that it was indeed achieved. That, and so much more.
For us, it was always a very satisfying project, and now it's really satisfying to see that last bit of it where every pipe is sounding great, it's getting steady wind, visually it's looking great, and it's easy to get into. A lot of those things, when we go to look at an organ that's in the shape of what this organ was 20 years ago, it's really satisfying to see it, become a perfect example of the restorative process. This organ looks great, sounds great, is fun to play, easy to get into. Those are the recipes for an organ that is going to last. There are some organs in the state or, in the world that we do worry about that are going underappreciated or being forgotten about. This isn't one of them. We know that this is an organ that is enjoyed, that it's got people there who are paying attention and who are celebrating it and protecting it. So we're very happy to see that.
And what I hope is that people come to all kinds of events in our sanctuary space and hear the organ, and it gets played and enjoyed for another 100 years to come.